Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
How are we going to pay attention to what's going on in our country over the next 2 years? What's happened? Something's happened. We are on. There was a problem. Okay, we're on. Hello. I thought there was because I didn't hear the hello. We're starting over. I apologize. Maybe you didn't hear it I feel like I'm more nasal than usual. But, gosh, I actually listened to part of a show from a few weeks ago that somebody had, tweeted out and said, listen to this. And I thought, okay, I will. I mean, I wonder what experience you would have if you listened to this. So I listened, and it ruined my day. It ruined my day. Now, I doubt that there's anybody who likes listening to the sound of their own voice, right? Remember the first time you ever heard it and you thought, what? That's me? Good God. It's like in our own heads, we sound so much better, sort of like, in the shower, we sing better. But I was just appalled at the way my voice sounded, but also the pauses, the sort of lack of energy. And I really thought, what the hell? You better pick up your game, baby, or just get out. I mean, I was really upset. So I'm going to try to be more energetic. There's nothing I can do about my voice, but there's no sense in hemming and hawing as much. Gee whiz. God bless you all for even listening. God. Whew. Speaking of listening, one of the sounds I hate most, and anybody who listens at all to the show knows, it's the sound of leaf blowers. The sound that destroys the spring, summer, and fall, right? Anyway, there's now a close second because I'm not hearing a lot of leaf blowers, but you know what I'm hearing now? And it just is so upsetting. The cutting down of trees. I hear the grinding. I hear the whatever. I say buzzsaw, and somebody will say to me, that's not a buzzsaw. That's a... But you know what I mean. I have to tell you, it's all I hear in my neighborhood. Everybody's cutting big trees down, and nobody is planting any. I used to live in this incredibly tree-filled neighborhood. The houses sat under a canopy of beautiful trees. Well, some beautiful trees, other trees mutilated by Duquesne Light Company. So some trees were like these, like these screwed up half trees or gutted down the middle trees. Because for some reason, Pittsburgh, God, never mind. I will go off on that. But I'm really worried. What the hell? Why are people? And I see other trees with like. I just think they're going to keep going down. Why doesn't anyone plant a big tree anymore? You know why? Because they won't live to see it be a big tree. Because they're just passing through. Because, well, I might own the property, but by the time that tree gets to me, I'm never going to see it. Is that what it is? God. And every time I see one of these trees down, and I swear, there's been about 8 or 10 just since I spoke to you last in my neighborhood. No sense that any will be replaced. So, it's upsetting. That's all I'm saying. It's really upsetting to me. And when I was walking the dog last night, I was looking around and looking at people's front yards and seeing where a nice big tree could be planted. And even if they won't reap the benefits, oh, never mind. And the other thing, when you take these trees down, does anybody ever think about the squirrels who've lost their homes, the birds who've lost their homes? Anyway, I don't get it. I'm struggling right now. So if I were listening to this, I'd be saying, why are you like... It's because my computer's gone berserk and I have only half a screen and I'm not sure how to get back what I need to get back because I can't see much of anything. It's just frozen. This is where I know someone, like my sister would say, just turn it off. All right. I'm turning it off. Are you sure you want? Yes. Okay. So I don't have anything in front of me for a while. Okay. So I wanted to share because I just wanted to share my misery and depression about everybody cutting trees down and nobody planting them. And when we do plant trees now, we plant little trees. No one's planting mighty trees. We need them. Damn it. And speaking of things coming down, my God, I saw a story. Oh, thank you. I saw a story that the building in which I used to do this show from, not sure that sentence was constructed properly, 650 Smithfield Street, City Center Tower. Center is spelled CENTRE, which is an absurd affectation, right? Why? I mean, why do people do that? Why? We will name this City Center Tower, and we'll misspell it. We'll spell it as if we were in London. Okay, so I read that. I mean, when we were ensconced at 650 Smithfield Street, which was most of the time I've worked with city paper. It's a big high rise, elevator banks, all that. It was clearly coming apart. I mean, you could tell it wasn't being maintained. Every time you got in an elevator, you prayed that you would get to the floor. I'm not kidding. You prayed. You got lucky if you got to the floor. If you didn't get stuck between floors, if whatever, there was always a chance of some issue that could be either terrifying. I always worried about life-threatening, plummeting down, 20 stories. But, I mean, the thing was just falling apart. Didn't look like it to a casual observer. But then I read, my God, this huge hunk of concrete from the building apparently last month came crashing down. I mean, this thing could have killed so many people. It's incredible. Came crashing down and crashed through the roof of the building next door, which houses a furrier. What's his name? Carl Herman Furriers. Crashed through that building, crashed through the roof, through the next story, through the next story. And after crashing through, I guess, 2 stories, finally came to rest on, I believe, the 4th story. I'm just lucky those floors were unoccupied. But, God dang, I'm glad we're out of there. That's all I want to say. That place is coming apart. And it was sold. Was it sold practically at a sheriff's sale? I know they were trying to sell it. Anybody who inspected it said, "Are you kidding me? It's a big friggin' building." So anyway, things falling apart is sort of an overriding theme in my head, in part because I'm falling apart. This is true structurally. I won't bore you with detail. And we know that, like, the place I used to work, that's falling apart. The trees are falling down. Sometimes they make the decision to do it, and other times we do too often. And then I read today that another thing that's falling apart in Pittsburgh, well, bridges are falling down in Pittsburgh. Jesus. And it turns out there was an article that the city has been given $7 million to fix and repair some of the steps in town. Now, very few cities have steps that they are responsible for. I don't think I've ever lived in a city that had steps that were public thoroughfares. You know, you go down that street, you take a left, you take the steps down to so-and-so street, and you take a right. I mean, steps are such a part of the infrastructure, the pedestrian infrastructure of Pittsburgh. And it's a wonderful thing. I mean, I just find the steps amazing here. Some of them are mind-blowing in their steepness and their endlessness, but an awful lot of them, if not most, are crumbling. And I have 4 different sets of steps that I regularly use in my own neighborhood when I'm out walking the dog. None of them are in good repair. One became so clearly hazardous that it was roped off. And so when I saw that the city has been given $7 million to repair the steps, I thought, oh, gosh, thank God. And then, unfortunately, I read further. Do you know how much it costs to repair one of Pittsburgh's extraordinary steps? Anywhere from $500,000 to $1.5 million. So let's cut it down the middle and say it costs $1 million to repair a set of the steps. And we've been given $7 million, which is to say that the vast majority, because I don't know how many there are, because I'm sure somebody knows that. It was not in this article. I kept looking for it, wanting to know. But 7 sets of steps are going to get repaired. That leaves hundreds that will continue to fall apart. Because I'm sure when the city tries to figure out budgetary matters, bridges probably trump steps. But it's such an iconic part of the city. And I'm glad that at least somebody's paying some attention, but the vast majority of the city steps urgently are in need of repair, and there's no money. And unless there's public hue and cry, unless the city is aware that, oh my God, a lot of people use those steps, they will not be repaired. And so steps like I use in a residential area where there are, you could go farther and take city sidewalks if cars aren't parked on them, and get around another way. So in determining what steps are to be fixed, they not only look at the condition, but they look at use, and they look at alternatives to using the steps and how available they are, because clearly there are some steps on some of the slopes in this town that are necessary. Now, used to be that a lot of those steps led people from their homes to their work, to the mills, for instance. But those destinations are long gone. And so I don't know. I just think that I wish somebody would start up some kind of GoFundMe to keep our steps, because they're special. Anyway, the article I read says that most of the steps were built in, I believe, were last built in 1950, and they have a lifespan generally of 70 years, which is why that's it. Milton, thank you. God bless you. There are 739, wow, individual sets of steps. In Pittsburgh. Wow. 739, including 44,000 plus risers, which help people get up or down over 24,000 vertical feet that are in the city. It's so special. It's so cool. Hello. I have a caller. Hello.
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 Hello, Lynn. It's Dave from Washington.
Good God. Hello.
Don't want to interrupt your story on steps, because I agree. I think that is fascinating. But I want to get back to what you were talking about, trees in residential neighborhoods.
All right.
Want to hear a little story? Okay, I'll try to keep this fast. My dad was transferred from Cleveland, Ohio to Pittsburgh back in 1964. Originally, they were going to send him to Birmingham, Alabama. My mom said, there's no way in hell I'm raising my family in Alabama. So
good for her.
Yep. So they sent him to Pittsburgh, which, being a U.S. Steel engineer, was like being sent to Jerusalem. So he was very happy. And first he went to places like Mount Lebanon and Bethel Park and looked at houses in there that were already built, and he didn't like any of those. And somebody said there's this nice little community right over the Washington County line called Peters Township, or McMurray, or whatever you want to call it. It's all wide open farmland, and you can buy a house, you can build a house. So I found a little lot, this brand new little neighborhood that was being built. picked out one of the first lots, and then the entire place is probably the most heavily wooded lot in this entire area. And they had to cut down certain trees just to build the damn house. Sure. Very, very wooded little lot. And I asked my dad years later, of all the places you could have, of all the lots in this little neighborhood, why did you choose this particular one? And he said, because he wanted all the trees. And because, nowadays they just get in a little farmer's field and build a bunch of houses in there, and there's no trees anywhere in the neighborhood. But there was 1,000 trees in our little lot. Now, this was back in the early 60s that we did this. We moved out of there in the late 70s, blah, 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 blah. A bunch of other people have lived in that house ever since then. And I went driving through there a couple times over the years. And besides the fact that the big farmer's field behind my house, where I used to play and have a great time, and my little rock and roll band used to blast out into, there's now a whole $800,000 house in my backyard. So anyways, there's only half the number of trees in my yard that there used to be. And in my job, people come from all over the area and sit in front of me, and I process them. And I've had people from my neighborhood, and I've mentioned that. What happened to the trees in my yard? And in the whole neighborhood, there's only half the trees there used to be. And they say, people just cutting them down. They just don't like the trees. They don't want to clean the gutters. Yeah, because I do.
Oh, jeez. Oh, it makes me crazy.
Yeah. There's only half the trees.
They see trees as litter producers. Oh, yeah. They drop leaves. They drop seeds. I've got unbelievable. I hate people. Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right. My yard was beautiful. Oh, my God. When we first moved there, it was this Pennsylvania wilderness. We had a creek running through the backyard, and it was just woods, more or less. And my dad, over the couple of years, cleaned that all out and, put a nice patio in the back and a thing, just beautiful, absolutely stunningly beautiful. We have pictures of it. It's like paradise, Eden down there. It's just so green. And of course, now, like I said, there's an $800,000 house in our backyard, and there's half the trees that there used to be. And every time I drive through there, I'm very disappointed. Now, I do understand that right smack dab across the street from my house, well, it used to be Tiger Burns' house, as a matter of fact, 2 great big trees in the front yard got blown over in one of the storms this summer and crashed across the street, knocked all the phone poles and everything down into my front yard, my old front yard. And another thing that's there that I really don't like, I do not like those big evergreens that people put in the front yards. I just don't like those because those, to me, that's like having a wall. You just can't see through them. You can't do anything. They've got a couple of those in the front yard now, too, and I hate those things. Those ain't going to cut down. But anyway, so I'm very dismayed. I'm with you. It was a beautiful yard, and and I used to mow, and mowing was difficult because first of all, it was on a hill, and trees everywhere. But now there's only half the trees there used to be, and it's because everybody's just cutting them down.
I don't know why people can. I don't know how anybody can cut a healthy tree down unless unless there's a true danger. And people sometimes see a danger just because there's a big tree next to their house. Well, what if it falls? I'm going to take it out first. And if you ask arborists, they'll say, oh man, that tree is in perfect condition. It's, God, what people do.
They had to, like I say, remove trees to put my house in. That's how wooded this lot was. I've got pictures of it that just mesmerized me. So anyway, so that's I want to tell you that story. Yeah. So if I ever build a house, and I probably won't because I'll never have the money to build a house these days, I'm going to find a place just like that. I don't want to be out in an open field where they don't have to remove any trees because there aren't any trees. Then you just bake in the sun. At least, trees around is a little bit cooler. So anyways, that's
trees, exactly. Trees help you with your utility bills. They keep a house cold, warmer, cooler in the summer. God.
They keep cities cooler. It helps. It helps knock down climate change because cities and all that concrete just radiates heat. Whereas they're trying to put more green spaces in cities, and Pittsburgh's actually pretty good at that.
Pretty good,
great, but we're pretty good. Yeah, we got a long way to go.
The trees, believe me, do more for the world than we do.
Oh hell yeah! All right, well that's it. Just wanted to say hello. It's been a long time.
Hello. Thank you.
Hello. Okay, I'll talk to you again soon.
Okay, goodbye. Oh, God. Yeah. Yeah. Well, if I remember begging when someone moved in next door to me and they were going to cut down 2 trees that provide great shade for my backyard. I begged him. I said, please, please, you cannot. And the guy said, that's what my mother said. I said, listen to your mother. She is right. And at that point, I saved that tree. But then the next people who moved in, well, they trimmed a lot of the branches. That's okay. God. Anyway, sorry. It's just things in my head that, just continue to cause me misery. Here's something that made me happy, and I join a horde of other Pittsburghers. It's ridiculous how happy it made me that Andrew McCutcheon's back in town. I just so loved that guy. Who didn't love that guy? I mean, I just loved him. Still haven't gotten used to him after he cut his hair, but I still love him. My God, that smile, that infectious. I mean, and part of me is unhappy that, you can imagine the cynical owner of the Pirates, this embarrassment of a team because of the owner, that nothing just thought this was a great idea because nobody goes to the game. Why would you? And he knows that with Andrew McCutcheon, people will come. Sign him, and they will come. And I don't know. I just love that he's back. It's funny. I don't think there's a lot of people in the public sphere that have an almost there's a unanimity of goodwill that comes their way. And in a time when unanimity is so gone in this divided country, it's often said that it's sports that pull us back together. Well, there's a great deal of truth in that. But then McCutcheon, as an individual in sports, is emblematic of that potential to unify. I mean, I have no doubt that if I met the guy, I'd really like him if he weren't anybody in particular and I just met him. Because he just radiates a positivity, which you could never be said of me, and just a joie de vivre, right? So I'm glad. There's something about this town that won him, and man, vice versa. So that was a happy thing that happened. Gigi writes, I'm with you on the tree issue. I live in one of those neighborhoods where people cut down trees for no reason. They don't like the leaves. They're afraid the roots will do damage to their house. We have donated and planted a few trees in our neighborhood in designated green spaces. I'll do almost anything to reforest the neighborhood. And I am also glad the Kutch is back. Enjoy the show. The snow. Okay. You can see how I saw show instead of snow. Yeah. Yeah. I am the little bit there is. And here's another thing that's dying. Barbara writes, there were many empty seats at the symphony yesterday. Very sad. More people don't attend and support our wonderful symphony. Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, I think, it's a generational thing, I fear, in that younger people are not used to going to be entertained and sitting still. And sitting still. That it's such a formal kind of a setting that I think it's off-putting to the more casual, youthful, anything goes, speeded up reality of our lives. I suspect. I don't know. But I, who love classical music, have often found going to the symphony a sort of stuffy event. I don't know why. There's always that fear that you'll clap at the wrong time. Oh boy, I never clap first. I wait. The orchestra seems to finish in this flourish, and then some poor soul will start clapping, and everybody, appalled because it's merely the end of a movement, not of the piece itself. And I do think it's stuff like that just... And also that more and more people don't know from classical music. I mean, I pointed out last week about the effort to get homeless people from hanging around some shop somewhere, and the way they got rid of them is playing Beethoven and Bach and Mozart through loudspeakers. And man, those people ran as if they were being assaulted by, the buzz of angry hornets. So there's that too. Things change, and change is hard. It's constant. You think we'd be better at it because it's the one thing that is constant is change. But we ain't so good at it. We ain't. All right. Well, what else do I have here? 739 sets of steps, and we got enough money to fix like 6 of them, 7. Oh man, they'll be going. I'm sure the ones near my house will go because it's not that heavily trafficked an area. It's not unusual for me to see people. And I'll tell you something else. Walking up the steps is a hell of a way to stay in shape. Because some of them, I mean, I often I'm just literally breathless after, or I have to stop. I go up about 20, and then I go up some more. But it's all, it's good for you. And that brings me to this other question, because I have a lot of houses, as I'm sure some of your neighborhoods do, where the houses are built on top of a pretty steep incline, and there are steps leading up to the home that might have 30 steps or 40 steps straight up. And I look at those steps in those houses, and I think, well, who the hell? What happens when somebody gets old and that's their house and they can't navigate? They can't go down them. I have more trouble going down steps than up steps, which is odd, but not in terms of what's required of your joints. But going up, I can't even imagine. And carrying groceries, and the mailboxes are down at the bottom. Would you even, I don't know. Is it only young people? Or there must be a lot of isolated old people in this town that are living in the home they've lived in, raised their families in, and damn if they can get in or out of them anymore. I don't know. I've often wondered. Oh, boy. I'm not going to. I saw something that I really don't want to talk about it, the shooting. Although, do you believe it? We're so mucked up in this country that a graph I saw, it's just amazing, a graph of, these kinds of massacres and other countries. There's no way you can graph it and have us in the mix, because the graph would be a regular graph, but then we don't fit on it because we are so out of it's like this line that goes and goes and goes, and the rest of the world is huddled at the bottom. We are, to call the United States an outlier in terms of gun violence is just doesn't rise to the occasion. And that we still, with that reality, still lack the political will to start to fix it. There's fixing it will be really impossible, but you can ameliorate. And I was going to say that I felt such relief when this gunman turned out not to be white. Isn't that something? Oh, look, there's a silver lining in this massacre. This is a guy killing his own, as opposed to a white person killing others. Phew, thought I. And then I saw, do you know how many what are called mass killings? I believe that means 4 people dead, maybe, and or wounded. Do you know how many there have been in this country this year? And I thought, a ton. But then I thought, wait a minute, this year? It's just 3 weeks old. We already have a long list? Yeah, we do. 3 weeks, and there have been 33 mass shootings in the United States in 2023. Used to be the names of these places would resonate. I don't know. And again, it's been said a million times, if we couldn't do anything after Sandy Hook, well then, quite clearly, we are a sick, sick country. And part of the sickness is our much worshipped Constitution and the Supreme Court's interpretation of the Second Amendment, which is so ludicrous. The Supreme Court could have helped. It has not. It has done nothing but exacerbate this. But for that Constitution and the much vaunted and valued Bill of Rights, and you look at that First Amendment that has made America this free country, the freedom to express ourselves in all kinds of ways. But then, of course, expression has to be identified. What constitutes expression? Well, again, the Supreme Court has decided money. That's where Citizens United came from, right? Money is expression. So people with money can buy lots of stuff, and it's their way of expressing themselves. Wow. So the First Amendment has become problematic in some ways, and the Second Amendment, God knows. And so I'm thinking this Constitution that we fall on our knees and thank God for the Constitution. A nation of laws, we tell ourselves. That's why you hear people saying we need a constitutional convention. We could no more pull off if we can't even amend the current one, we sure as hell can't have a constitutional convention. And do you know what country doesn't have a constitution? I suppose Americans think every country has a constitution because that's the way we're set up, and that's how we have governed this nation. There's a constitution which lays out the framework of the government and the responsibilities of the government and blah, 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 and what should be criminal and what people should be allowed, all that stuff's in there. Israel does not have a constitution. And I don't know why, but my guess is upon its this is a guess. I have absolutely no idea why. My guess is that in 1948, when the State of Israel was created, along with yours truly, the idea of hammering out a constitution when there were so many other pressing issues around, like all the neighbors about to attack us, I guess it just never happened. And also because if you have 3 Jews in a room, you got 3 different opinions and very little ability to come to agreement. That's my guess. But the fact that it doesn't have a constitution is why now Israeli democracy is at great threat. And I don't know if you've been paying attention, but I have. Because one of the things that is always said is that there is a special relationship because that has been one of the few functioning democracies in that part of the world. People vote their governments in and out, but there's no constitution. There's not 2 branches of the legislature like we have. There's just one, the Knesset, that's the legislative body, and then a prime minister arises from that body, and then there is a Supreme Court. And it has been the Israeli Supreme Court that has pushed back over the years against the most egregious things coming out of the Knesset. Pushed back. The court has always been more liberal than the Knesset. Well, now, if you've been watching, it's a nightmare. And Netanyahu, acting like the autocrat he is attempting to take power from the Supreme Court, which would mean the only power would be with him in the Knesset. And I got to tell you, for anybody, I mean, I never talk about Israel because it's so fraught and there's just too much emotional stuff going on there for me. But Netanyahu is the gravest danger to Israel that I've ever seen. And if you were to ask Israelis, about half would agree. They are a democracy like ours in that they are totally divided right now. And the same kinds of forces, the illiberal, authoritarian, racist on one side, and then a much more liberal, progressive, democratic other side. And I don't know. We are in big, big trouble. I say we because I have cared. And if Israel loses the support that the American Jewish community has always given it, I don't know. Netanyahu, in order to have power, has brought into his coalition government every manner of appalling, crazed, religiously right-wing and racist, Palestinian-hating person he can find. I don't know. Unbelievable. Awful man. And I can tell you that the majority of American Jews agree with me. An awful, awful man who is destroying the possibility for what has always seemed unthinkable, a two-state solution, a Palestinian state, along with a Jewish state. God Almighty. Okay. This is why I don't talk about it. See, it just takes the wind out of my sails. It's just so upsetting. It's so upsetting. Oh my God. DeSantis. Not that I wanna. But I guess the way my head's working is, speaking of autocrats, DeSantis is running Florida as if he owns it. He's decreeing things from the governor's office that my reaction is always, wait, you mean a governor can just unilaterally do that? And in some cases, no, he can't. But that takes a while, and the courts take a while. And then it doesn't matter because DeSantis is engaging in this performance of taking down liberals and Democrats and woke folk. And that's all that matters to him, building that perception of him as the guy who acts. So he has, as I'm sure you've heard, proclaimed. I think of a governor even bothering to spend his time looking at advanced placement curricula in high schools. But that's his latest salvo. He has proclaimed that the advanced placement course, and this is something put out by the College Board, they oversee it. The advanced placement course on African American studies his exact words are, is inexplicably contrary to Florida law and significantly lacks educational value. Now, understand that this course was drawn up with the help of teams of African American professors, experts in the field. And they created this course, which is already being taught in over, I believe, 600 other school districts. That a governor would be bothering with one class being taught. But of course, when we find out, oh, it's about African Americans, and which means it's going to talk about race in America. And since he's passed all kinds of laws that essentially prevent Floridian teachers and students from kindergarten to university level of talking freely about the reality of American history, unbelievable. The Woke Act prohibits, among a lot of other things, instructing children that could make any student feel responsible or feel guilt about the past actions of other members of their race. Whoa. Well, if that is the criteria, how can we ever teach any history? How can history be taught? Because history is this constant, unfolding story of man's inhumanity to man in large part. Right? Not all, but a lot. And so if you can't teach something because it might make a student feel bad, well, the student should. We should all feel shame. Why not? What is their problem? It is beyond me. It's beyond me. If the history is shameful, then yes, a proper reaction would be shame. Now, my family were immigrants here long after slavery was abolished. My family didn't own any slaves. And yet, I feel shame, not as a white person necessarily, but as a human being. And for those, and there's so many Americans who do have a family history that involves ownership of other human beings, I think that's a really important thing for a person to know and come to terms with and sit with. It is not history's job to make anybody feel good about themselves. That's not what history is. It's memory. It's this is what was. And if you don't know where you're coming from, it's beyond me. How do you think the Germans, after the Holocaust, if they had a Ron DeSantis in charge, do you think, can you imagine what their history would have been? How would you teach German history? Huh? They owned it. And I'll credit them for it. They owned it. They know there was no getting around it. But if Ron DeSantis were in charge, I guess German students would have been taught what? What about World War II? What would they? What, could there have been a book? DeSantis has actually had math books pulled because they're considered too woke. Math, ladies and gentlemen. You know, God, help us. Do you remember how conservatives used to call liberals snowflakes? Like we were these weak people. These weak people. I have never seen a group of weaker, more frightened humans than those who subscribe to this kind of insanity. At the university level in Florida right now, you got university administrators spending their time trying to prove that they are not teaching the things DeSantis says you can't. At the university level, because his administration has required that all colleges and universities submit in detail all campus activities related to diversity, equity, inclusion. These are all bad words, Sam. And critical race theory. That is right. And then you've got them, the don't say gay stuff. I have to tell you, anyone who chooses to live in that state, I condemn them if there's a choice. I condemn you. I even condemn you if you go vacation in that goddamn state and put any of your money into the coffers of that state. Aiding and abetting. I mean it. What a bunch of vile beings. In Duval County, school administrators recently pulled 26 books from the elementary school curriculum. And do you know what one of them is? This might resonate here. One of them was Roberto Clemente, Pride of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Mm-hmm. Well, you can only imagine. You can only imagine why that one had to be pulled. Wow. And this is the guy who the despicable, shameless Republicans are looking toward as their savior. God. Milton writes, this goes back to the symphony. For the last 5 years, I see we're out of time too. Sorry, I didn't know I went on a rant. For the last 5 years before I left Pittsburgh, I had season tickets to the symphony. Your trepidation over clapping between movements is one that gives many folks anxiety. But not clapping between movements isn't really bad form. Back in 2008, Joshua Bell's performance of the Beethoven Violin Concerto, Opus 61, was so moving that I found myself not only spontaneously applauding, but standing. What? In the fifth row from the stage. Milton. Not because I was unfamiliar with the piece, but because it was just that awesome. Mr. Bell couldn't help but notice the lone black dude in the audience standing and clapping wildly. He smiled, nodded, and quietly mouthed the words, "Thank you." I was mortified at my faux pas until I read this years later. And it talks about where that comes from, not clapping during movements. It originated in the early 20th century in Germany and spread like wildfire. It's now an entrenched practice in concert halls, with some listeners giving the evil eye and shushing concertgoers who dare to break the silence between the movements of a larger work. If it's really hot music, how can you keep it back? Said Manfred Honeck, music director of the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra. People should react to what they hear on stage. You should let it go. Let it happen. Yes. And Milton, wow, what a story. What a story. Thank you from the stage in between movements. And your, God, bless you. I love that story. Thank you. That made my day. And I got to move on. So tomorrow, I guess Susan, and Wednesday, Sally Wiggin is joining us. Sally Wiggin, who, unlike our first caller, whose mother said to his father, upon being offered a job in the steel industry in Birmingham, Alabama, said, "No, we're not moving to Birmingham. I'm not raising my children there." Unfortunately, Sally's father was employed in Birmingham in the steel industry. So maybe it was Sally's father who took the job that your dad didn't. And it was rough because they were not Southerners. They were New Englanders. Yeah. So Sally will be on Wednesday. And that's all I got. Have a good one.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.